So you may have heard the news over the last couple of days that Hobbii will no longer be shipping to Australia. And as the owner of a yarn company here in Australia, I thought I would give my 2 cents on why I think Hobbii aren't shipping to Australia anymore and why I think Australian yarn businesses do not last. All right, let's get into it. So Hobbii is a yarn company based in Denmark who ship yarn all over the world, including Australia, until the 1st of June. Now, shipping to Australia is incredibly expensive. We are so far away from the majority of the world, especially Europe, that it just makes shipping prices so incredibly high. Now, I haven't purchased yarn from Hobbii for a very long time, but as far as I'm aware, they do offer a free shipping option, which means if you spend over a certain amount of money on their website, they will cover the entire shipping cost. Shipping from Australia to Australia is already so expensive. I'll get more into this a little bit later, but I can only imagine the costs, the money that they are absorbing into offering free shipping to Australia. Now that brings me into my next point, which is yarn is such a low value product, so the profit margins on yarn are extremely small. Manufacturing and selling yarn isn't the same as manufacturing and selling, say, clothing, for instance, where brands can make a t-shirt for a few bucks and then sell it for $80. I'm not in the fashion industry, obviously, so I don't know the exact costs involved, but it's a lot easier to mark up prices on clothing than it is to mark up prices on yarn, for instance. Like, let's use a 100-gram skein of acrylic yarn, for instance. The most the average person is probably prepared to pay for that is about $5, give or take a few dollars here and there. But you can see that the profit margins are just so different here. Now, combine those low profit margins with the shipping costs that they are absorbing by offering free shipping to Australia. That's just not sustainable for any business. And honestly, I'm surprised that they have lasted as long as they have. Now let's get into why I think yarn businesses do not survive in Australia and why we have very limited options. So continuing on from my previous point about profit margins being incredibly low, let's talk about the costs that are actually involved in importing yarn into Australia. So first up, you of course have the price of the product. So that is the price that you pay per skein of yarn from your manufacturer. So say, for example purposes, one skein of yarn from your manufacturer costs $3. Now, I say US dollars because when you're dealing with international manufacturers, you are always dealing in US dollars. That's just how it works. So that makes one skein of yarn about $5 Australian, depending on the exchange rate on the day. And then you have to pay for the shipping costs to get it here, which obviously will vary just depending on the size of your shipment. Once it arrives in Australia, you then have to pay your import and customs fees, which again does vary depending on the value of your shipment. But take it from me, it ain't cheap. So you can see here that all the profits are being eaten into before we as a business have even seen the yarn or it's even been loaded into our shelves. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, why not just get your yarn made in Australia to save on all of these costs? I am not lying when I tell you I have contacted just about every yarn mill in Australia, and not one of them are prepared to sell yarn to another business who is going to then sell it under their own label. This is called white labeling. It's where a manufacturer produce and sell a product to a brand, and then that brand can then put their name and their business logo on the product. Not one yarn mill that I have contacted here in Australia is willing to do that. Not only that, they also just don't have the facilities and the resources to produce the yarns that we sell. For example, chenille and velvet yarns cannot be produced in Australia because we just don't have the facilities to be able to do it. fun fact actually, majority of Australian wool is exported into China so they can process it and take it from its raw form to a skein of yarn that you would see on the shelf. And then we as Australia buy it back because we quite literally don't have the resources here to be able to process the wool from its raw form into a skein. So the only way for me to have my products made here in Australia would literally be for me to open up my own yarn mill. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a lazy few $1 million lying around to be able to do that. Now let's get into the shipping costs. So as I mentioned earlier, shipping costs are incredibly high and they are constantly getting higher and higher. Australia Post has just risen their prices again. I literally just got an email the other day saying their prices are going up again, and this happens every 6 months, I want to say. So at Source of Fibre, we charge shipping on every single order. We no longer offer a free shipping option because we quite literally cannot afford it. And even though we are charging shipping on every single order, we still absorb thousands, and I'm not kidding when I say this, thousands of dollars every single month on shipping costs alone. Why? Because the amount we charge for shipping is actually still a lot lower than what it actually costs us to ship the parcel. If we charged what it actually cost to ship out all our orders, nobody would shop with us because nobody would want to pay the shipping fee. There have been times in my own business where the customer has paid $18 for standard shipping and it has quite literally cost me $180 to ship it out. That is all my profits from that order completely gone. And this happens all the time. This is not a once-off thing. This happens every single day. Now, you might also be thinking, but don't businesses get discounts on shipping because they're shipping so many orders? And the answer is technically yes. But I'll be honest with you, the savings are quite literally cents per order. It's not like we're getting half price shipping or like huge discounts. We are quite literally saving cents on orders. Like the discount is literally nothing. We're on the highest band of shipping savings with Australia Post, and we are still losing thousands of dollars every single month. And the main reason our shipping prices are so high is because yarn is bulky and it's heavy, and there's no way of getting around that. Now, a lot of people ask us, why don't you vacuum seal your yarn when you're shipping it out to help save on postage costs? And my answer to that is, it would not make a difference because the package is still going to weigh the same. We then have to factor in the cost of the vacuum seal bags, the machine to vacuum seal the bags, the extra time it's going to take us to pack every single order because we're having to vacuum seal every order. And then you also run the risk of damaging the yarn and the vacuum seal failing during transit and then our orders bursting open during transit. So it just wouldn't make a difference and it's just not worth it. Now, the next reason I think yarn businesses don't last in Australia is because it is such a niche product. Yarn is such a niche product and our population is already so small when you compare it to countries like the US, for instance. Our customer base is a lot smaller, which means less orders and slower moving stock, which makes it hard to expand because it just all comes back down to those profit margins. And I still haven't mentioned all the other costs that are involved in running a business, like rent, utilities, wages. These costs also eat into profit margins. Honestly, I could keep talking about this all day long, but I'm going to wrap up this video by saying if you want more yarn options in Australia, please, please, please support your Australian businesses. Without your support, we cannot grow. And if we don't get the support, we will fail. It's as simple as that. So next time you ask us when we're getting a certain yarn or when we're expanding, ask yourself, have you supported us in order for us to make that happen? Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on. I hope you enjoyed this little insight and I will see you in my next video.